Chosen one. Every closed door does not erase your worth. There is a ring of keys, some of them worn smooth, not because they are broken, but because they have been tried over and over again in front of countless different doors. One job after another has closed its doors. One relationship after another has come to an end. One plan after another has led nowhere. Chosen one. If you are holding a ring of keys like that today, then these words are for you. I am not going to tell you that there is one particular door waiting to open for you someday. I am not going to promise you your dream job, the perfect spouse, or unexpected financial blessings. Instead, I want to invite you to consider another possibility, the true meaning behind all the doors that have already closed behind you. Stay with me for a little while, not because you're afraid of missing something, but because perhaps this is the first time anyone has invited you to look at that ring of keys from an angle you've never considered before. Picture a long hallway lined with doors on both sides. Some have already been tested, some remain quietly closed, and at the very end of that hallway stands one door you have not even reached out to touch. In John 10:9. There is a verse many believers return to whenever they feel they have walked through too many doors without finding an entrance. It speaks of a door through which anyone who enters will be saved, will come in and go out, and will find pasture. It is not a door that demands people reshape themselves to fit it. It is a door already opened for those who draw near. Chosen one. Before we go any further, there is something you need to separate in your mind. The number of doors that have closed in front of you is not the number of times you have failed as a human being. It may simply be the number of places that were never meant to be yours. Think about how a scientist approaches an experiment. When an experiment fails to produce the expected result, the scientist does not conclude that they are a failure. They see it as data, valuable information that tells them which direction no longer needs to be explored. If you applied that same perspective to your own life, every closed door would no longer be an accusation against you. Instead, it would become another piece of information helping you discover the path that truly belongs to you. Perhaps you have become accustomed to treating every closed door as proof that you are not talented enough, not fortunate enough, or somehow lacking something essential that everyone else seems to possess. The job didn't work out, so you assume you weren't good enough. The relationship ended, so you conclude that maybe you're simply incapable of lasting love. The business collapsed, so you convince yourself that you lack vision. This way of thinking is incredibly easy to fall into because it offers the illusion of control. If every closed door is your fault, then at least you can believe that if you change enough, the outcome will eventually change too. But while that logic may feel empowering for a moment, it quietly drains your strength day after day, forcing you to carry responsibility for doors that may never have belonged to you in the first place. But what if every closed door is not a verdict on who you are? What if it is simply part of a narrowing process, helping you stop wasting time knocking on doors that were never yours to enter? Chosen one. This is not a question you need to answer immediately. It is a question I simply invite you to carry with you as we continue walking through this journey together. Chosen one, let me ask you something honestly. How long have you been carrying that ring of keys? And how many doors have you tried? Perhaps you've submitted 7 job applications, only to receive 7 rejection emails, brief, polite, and equally empty. Perhaps you invested all your savings into opening a small business, only to close it 8 months later when the rent became greater than the income it produced. Perhaps there was a relationship you truly believed would end in marriage, only for it to dissolve into silence without any real explanation. Proverbs 16:9. tells us that people plan their own course, but something greater directs their steps. It is not a denial of your effort. It is a reminder that another kind of guidance may be unfolding alongside the plans you have carefully made. I once heard the story of a woman who spent 5 years trying 4 completely different careers. She started selling products online. Then she worked in the travel industry. Later, she opened a personal development class. Eventually, she became a freelance designer. Every new beginning filled her with hope. Every time she believed, this one will be different. Yet after several months, or sometimes a year, each opportunity came to an end. Not because she was lazy, not because she lacked commitment, but because, for one reason after another, none of them truly flourished. She said the hardest part wasn't any single failure by itself. The hardest part was what happened after the 4th one. She began wondering whether she herself was the problem, not any particular career she had chosen. One evening, she sat alone in front of her computer and reopened every old project folder. As she clicked through them one by one, it felt as though she were flipping through a photo album filled with dreams that had never become reality. Page after page. She told me that beginning again for the 5th time wasn't actually the hardest part. By then, she had learned how to start over. What felt almost unbearable was figuring out how to begin that 5th chapter without carrying the full weight of the previous 4, as though every new beginning had to drag the burden of every past disappointment along with it. Chosen one, you do not need to count how many keys have worn smooth to know how hard you have tried. You already know that in the deepest part of yourself. Perhaps the heaviest burden is not each individual disappointment, but the cumulative weight of them all, as though every door that closed did more than shut out an opportunity. It also closed off another piece of your confidence in your own abilities. Perhaps your story is similar, not identical, but marked by the same feeling. Maybe it was a job interview you prepared for with great care, only to never receive a response. Maybe it was a business plan you truly believed would succeed, only to quietly come to an end after a few months. Maybe it was someone you trusted to walk beside you for years, only to discover one day that they were simply gone. There is something heartbreaking hidden inside many well-meaning words of encouragement, that if you simply believe enough, if you persevere long enough, every door will eventually open. But reality is more complicated than that. Some doors will never open, no matter how much faith you have or how faithfully you knock, because they were never meant to open for you. And that does not mean there is something wrong with your faith. Chosen one, there is a sound you have probably heard far too many times. It is the dry click of a lock after the key has turned as far as it can, yet the door remains closed. One evening you sit down and begin making a list. Everything you have tried, every road you have taken. One line after another, you cross them out slowly, as though every mark is an admission that something once full of hope simply did not work out. James 1:5 tells us that if anyone lacks wisdom, they should ask, because there is one who gives generously and without finding fault. That is very different from blaming yourself. The verse does not say you lack wisdom because you are inadequate. It simply acknowledges that there are moments when human beings genuinely do not know which direction to take, and there is nothing shameful about admitting that. I once knew a man who made a list of every job he had held over the previous 10 years. Sales representative, rideshare driver, warehouse supervisor, then, for a short time, a real estate agent. None of those jobs lasted longer than 2 years. As he stared at the list, he found himself wondering, was he the problem, or were the jobs themselves simply never the right fit? He told me that one evening he sat in front of that list for hours, desperately searching for a common pattern, a repeated mistake, something he could fix so the next attempt would finally be different. But the longer he looked, the more confused he became. Each job had ended for an entirely different reason. There was no formula. One company downsized. Another workplace simply wasn't a healthy cultural fit for him. Another ended because of decisions made by other people, decisions completely outside his control. He told me that what frightened him most was not finding an 11th job. He knew how to start over. What terrified him was filling out the section on every new application that asked, "Reason for leaving your previous position." Every time he wrote another answer, it felt as though he were adding one more line to an ever-growing record of personal failures, even though, in truth, most of those endings had never really been his fault. Chosen one. Not every lock that refuses to open does so because your key is wrong. Some locks were simply never intended to open for you, no matter how perfectly you turned the key. There is an important difference between learning from a closed door and turning every closed door into fresh evidence for an indictment you keep writing against yourself. Learning asks, "What could I do differently next time?" Self-condemnation declares, "I am the problem at every door, every time, without exception." There is something you need to hear clearly today. A door that refuses to open does not automatically mean you chose the wrong key or turned it the wrong way. Sometimes, it simply means that particular door was never designed to open for you, regardless of how faithfully you tried. That does not mean you should never examine yourself after disappointment. Honest self-reflection is often necessary. Sometimes it reveals lessons that become priceless for whatever comes next. But there is a boundary between examining yourself in order to grow and condemning yourself for the rest of your life because of doors that never truly belong to you. Chosen one. This may be the hardest part of all, and I don't want to avoid it. There comes a moment when you stand before a door holding an entire ring of keys, only to realize that every single key has already been tried. There are no new possibilities left to test. Nothing else to reach for. Only the silent door before you, and a person standing there with hands that somehow feel empty, even while still holding a ring full of keys. Lamentations 3:8 speaks of crying out for help, only to feel as though even your prayers cannot get through. Those are not the words of someone who lacks faith. They are the honest words of someone who feels blocked on every side, even in prayer. I once heard the story of a man whose small business was forced to close. After locking the doors for the final time, he sank onto the floor of the warehouse, surrounded by boxes that had never been cleared away. The keys to that building were still in his hand. He didn't cry, not at first. He simply sat there staring at those keys, realizing that he no longer knew what else to try. He told me the feeling wasn't exactly sadness. It was emptiness. A very particular kind of emptiness, one where even making plans for the next step felt meaningless because the previous step, and the one before that, had all led nowhere. He remained there for a long time among those unopened boxes. Night fell completely, yet he couldn't even find the motivation to switch on the lights. He later said that it was the first time in many years that he had no next plan. No new list of opportunities to pursue. No fresh business idea waiting to be launched. Only that emptiness and the growing darkness slowly filling the warehouse. Chosen one. I am not going to rush in and tell you that everything will be okay. I am not going to tell you that there is another door waiting just ahead, ready to open if you can simply hold on a little longer. There are evenings when the only thing you can do is sit down in the middle of the hallway, a ring of keys in your hand, and admit that, at this moment, you simply do not know where to go next. Chosen one, if you are holding a ring of keys like that right now, whether literally or only in your heart, I am not telling you that you have to figure out your next step tonight. There are nights when the only thing you can do is sit with that emptiness and acknowledge that it is real, not pretending it hurts less than it does, not rushing to find a lesson to comfort yourself, simply admitting that, right now, it truly is heavy. Perhaps what you need at this moment is not another key. Perhaps what you need is permission to sit down in the middle of the hallway without pretending you still have the strength to get back up immediately. There is something deeply unfortunate about the kind of encouragement people often offer too quickly, that someone who is exhausted should immediately stand back up, immediately keep believing, immediately refuse to become discouraged for even a moment. But the truth is, you are allowed to sit down. You are allowed to feel tired. You are allowed, for one evening, to not want to pick up that ring of keys again. Faith does not require you to pretend that you are not exhausted. Chosen one, let me tell you about a man named Saul in the book of 1 Samuel. Saul was the son of Kish, a man of wealth and standing. One day, Kish's donkeys wandered away and were lost. He sent Saul and one of his servants to search for them. Saul traveled through the hill country of Ephraim, through the land of Shalisha, through the land of Shaalim, and throughout the territory of Benjamin, yet they found nothing. After many days of searching without success, Saul finally said to his servant, "Perhaps we should go back. My father may stop worrying about the donkeys and begin worrying about us instead." Here was a man who had walked across countless regions, explored countless directions, and had nearly abandoned the very mission that had sent him there. But at that moment, the servant suggested that they visit a nearby town where a man of God lived, hoping he might tell them which way to go. There, Saul met the prophet Samuel, who anointed him as the first king of Israel. Chosen one, I am not telling you this story to suggest that you too are about to be elevated to some great position. That is not something I can know, nor is it the most important part of the story. The important part is this: a search that appeared to have failed completely became the very road that led Saul somewhere entirely different from what he had been looking for. Chosen one, look carefully at what happened. Saul never found the donkeys in any of the fields he searched. His original mission, in the most literal sense, was a complete failure. Yet that unsuccessful search, those long walks across one empty region after another, became the only path that led him towards something he had never imagined. Something far greater than a few lost animals. Think about a locksmith. When a locksmith looks at a customer's ring of worn-out keys, he does not think, "Here is someone who has failed." He thinks, "Here is someone who searched seriously, someone who kept trying, someone who did not give up easily." Chosen one, perhaps the many doors you have tested, even though none of them opened the way you hoped, are not evidence of your failure. Perhaps they are evidence that you searched sincerely enough to discover, one by one, which places were never meant for you. Think about this for another moment. When Saul was searching for the donkeys, he had no idea he was about to become king. All he knew was that he had crossed many regions without finding what he had been looking for. If he had given up a little earlier, if he had turned back after the very first day without results, he might never have met Samuel. Yet he also did not continue because he was certain that something extraordinary was waiting ahead. He continued for a much simpler reason. It was simply what a responsible person does, to keep walking, even without knowing how the story will end. Chosen one, let me be especially clear here, because this is where many people misunderstand the story. During those frustrating days of searching for the lost donkeys, Saul had absolutely no idea what the journey would ultimately mean. He only knew that he was tired and ready to go home. Perhaps that is why, at this very moment, you cannot yet see the meaning behind all the doors that have closed before you. Not because they have no meaning, but because you are still in the middle of the journey. Chosen one, if these words remind you of something you have been trying to force yourself to fit into for far too long, a job, a lifestyle, or an identity you believed you had to become, even though it has never truly fit who you are, I want to invite you to try one small thing tonight. Write down one specific thing you have been forcing yourself to fit into for far too long, not because you are giving up forever, simply to give yourself permission, for tonight alone, to stop trying to force that key into a lock that may never have been designed to open for you. Tomorrow you may decide to try again. That is perfectly okay. This is only one evening to discover what it feels like to set that key down, even if only for a little while. Chosen one, and this is where everything begins to reverse. In Revelation 3:8, there is a verse many believers return to when they feel they have stood before far too many closed doors. It speaks of a door that has been opened, one that no one can shut. Imagine a door with no lock at all. No key is required, no perfect angle, no need to prove that you fit. Just a gentle push and it opens. Have you ever considered that possibility? That perhaps the most important door in your life will never require you to possess the perfect key. The door meant for you is not the one that demands you prove you deserve to enter. The door meant for you is not the one that requires you to discover the perfect formula after countless failed attempts. The door meant for you is not a reward handed out only after you have suffered enough. Perhaps what is being prepared for you requires only one thing, that you remain present, without clinging tightly to anything, when it opens in its own time and in its own way. Chosen one, listen carefully to this. The fact that you've been carrying a heavy ring of keys, trying one after another, does not necessarily mean you're missing the one key that truly matters. It may simply mean you've been standing in front of the wrong kind of door. Some doors are never meant to be unlocked with keys. They simply require you to be close enough when the time comes. That doesn't mean the road ahead will suddenly become effortless. It doesn't mean no work will be required. It means the kind of effort that will be needed is different from the kind you've grown accustomed to. No longer the exhausting effort of proving yourself. No longer striving to be worthy. No longer forcing yourself to fit into a mold that was never made for you. Instead, it becomes a quieter kind of effort, more like walking forward and gently pushing on a door, rather than wrestling endlessly with a stubborn lock. There is something I want to make very clear here, because this is often misunderstood. I'm not saying that if you stop trying, a perfect door will automatically appear. I'm not saying that the weariness you're carrying will soon be rewarded with a specific opportunity. What I am saying is much simpler. The burden of constantly having to prove your worth does not have to be a burden you carry forever. Let the words from Revelation settle into your heart for a moment. This is not a promise about one particular event happening at one particular time. It is an acknowledgement that there is another kind of door, one that doesn't operate according to the same logic as the doors you've always known. The logic of proving yourself, of earning your place, of becoming good enough before you're allowed to enter. Chosen one. What does it actually look like to let go of the keys you no longer need in an ordinary day? It doesn't mean you stop trying. It doesn't mean you stop searching. It doesn't mean you stop embracing new opportunities. It simply means you learn to recognize the difference between persevering in something that truly fits and forcing yourself to fit into something that never did. Think about two people carrying the exact same heavy ring of keys. The first person keeps forcing every old key into every new lock they encounter, hoping this time will somehow be different, even though nothing about their approach has changed. The second person begins paying attention. They notice which keys have become worn smooth, which ones have never fit any lock they've tried, and little by little, they learn to set those keys aside. Both people carry the same history of closed doors, but one keeps repeating the same pattern. The other is learning to see the journey through different eyes. No one promises the second person that every door will magically open once they put those old keys down. They simply stop wasting their strength on locks that have already proven again and again that they were never meant for them. That difference isn't found in the number of failures. Both people may have failed at exactly the same number of doors. The difference is this: one person allows every disappointment to pile up into a weight too heavy to carry. The other learns, one by one, to lay each burden down after acknowledging it, instead of carrying it on their shoulders for the rest of the journey. Chosen one, there's one question I'd like to leave with you. You don't have to answer it right now. Among all the doors you've tried, the 7 job applications that were rejected, the 8 months you poured into that small business, the relationship that ended without a single explanation, is there one door that, looking back now, you're actually relieved stayed closed? I ask because we often gather every closed door into one single story, a story of loss, a story of failure. But if you separate them, one by one, you may discover that some of those doors were never ones you truly wanted to walk through. You only believed you should, because everyone around you was pursuing them, or because you feared that if you didn't try, you'd regret it later. Perhaps those closed doors were never trying to tell you that you were wrong. Perhaps they were simply leading you closer to a door you will never need a key to enter. Chosen one, perhaps you won't wake up tomorrow to find the door at the end of the hallway already standing open. There may still be more doors to try, and some of them may still remain closed, but you can wake up tomorrow and choose not to write another line in the indictment against yourself simply because one more door refused to open. Chosen one, before we bring this conversation to a close, let me slow down with you for just a moment. Picture the man who once collapsed onto the floor of that empty warehouse. Months later, he stands in his kitchen, opens a drawer, and places that old ring of keys inside. He doesn't throw them away. He simply puts them away. A ring of keys belonging to doors that no longer need to be opened is gently laid to rest in a quiet place. He doesn't have to decide right then whether he'll ever need them again. He simply closes the drawer and walks out of the kitchen with empty hands for the first time in a very long while. There is a profound difference between carrying a heavy ring of keys in your pocket every day and knowing they are safely stored in a drawer. Both are forms of carrying. But one is a burden that never leaves you. The other becomes simply part of the road you've already traveled. There were evenings, many weeks later, when he walked past that drawer without feeling the need to open it anymore. Not because he had forgotten what happened, but because he trusted that everything that needed to be acknowledged had already been acknowledged. Now he could leave it there and continue moving forward. Chosen one, you don't have to throw away your entire ring of keys tonight. You don't have to reach a final verdict about every closed door in a single evening. Real change rarely arrives in one dramatic moment. More often, it comes little by little. Just as that man placed each key into the drawer, not all at once, but gradually, at a pace that belonged to him alone. You simply need to know that there is a drawer waiting for you. And one key at a time, you are allowed to set them down instead of gripping them tightly every hour of every day. You can carry the memory of every closed door and still continue walking with open, relaxed hands. Both can be true at the same time. You do not have to erase your past in order to move forward more lightly. No one has the right to demand that you move faster than your own pace. Not anyone, not even yourself. Chosen one, these are the last things I want you to hear today. Let me leave you with 3 thoughts before we part. First, the doors that have closed throughout your life may never be fully explained. No one has the authority to promise they know the reason behind every one of them. Second, the way you look at the worn ring of keys in your hand may already be changing. What once felt like evidence of your failure may simply be evidence of a process of elimination, a journey that is still unfolding. And third, you can stand firm today, not because you've already found the final door, but because you no longer need to carry that ring of keys as a lifelong burden. Chosen one, I know that after this video ends, the hallway will still be there. Some doors will remain closed. There may even be more attempts that don't work out. I cannot promise that the right door will appear tomorrow, or next week, or next month, or at any specific moment. No one has the authority to make that promise for you, and anyone who guarantees it is promising something they cannot control. But every time you choose to lay down a key you no longer need, instead of forcing it into a lock that was never yours, you are no longer merely waiting. You are already beginning to live more freely. Perhaps years from now, when you look back on this season, you won't remember the exact day the right door finally appeared. But you may remember this moment. The moment you decided that even though the hallway was still lined with closed doors, you would set the ring of keys down, instead of gripping it as proof of your worth. If these words speak to the ring of keys you've been carrying in your own heart, perhaps you'll share them with someone else, someone who may also be standing before a closed door tonight, holding a ring of keys, unsure which one to try next. Not because you'll lose anything if you don't, but because sometimes the greatest gift someone can receive is simply knowing that another person has stood in the same hallway before them. Chosen one, I know many messages like this promise far too much, far too quickly. I won't tell you that your final door will certainly open this week, or this month, or this year. All I can honestly tell you is this: the way you carry that ring of keys can become lighter, starting today. And if you'd like, leave a comment below with the name of one door you're standing in front of right now. You don't have to explain every detail. It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be real. No matter how many keys you're holding today, no matter how many doors have closed behind you, Your worth has never been measured by the number of doors that opened or closed. It is measured by the simple fact that you are still here, still standing, still moving forward. You don't have to remain in front of that same door forever, trying every key one more time. May your hands be released tonight, no longer gripping the old ring of keys. And may you discover that you don't need a single key to stand firmly where you are today.